Gandhara. As the night was far advanced, the royal messenger allowed his horses a short rest in the Vihara and set out with Charaka at an early hour the following morning. The two travelers could not, however, make rapid progress, for the atmosphere was murky and the fogs of the rainy season obscured the way. They passed a picket of Gandhara soldiers who were on the lookout for the hostile mountaineers. The mounted messenger showed them his passport, and the two men reached the capital only when the shades of evening were settling upon the valley. The gates were carefully guarded by armed men. The sentinel led the two horsemen to the officer at the gate, who seemed satisfied with the report that Charaka had nowhere encountered enemies. But the home news was very bad, for one of the princes had died, and Chandana, commonly called Kanishka, the third and youngest son of the king, was thought to be critically ill. The night was darker than usual, and the town made a gloomy impression. The inhabitants were restless and seemed to be prepared for a dire calamity. Charaka was at once conducted to the royal palace. He passed through a line of long streets which seemed narrow and dismal. The people whom they met on their way, being wrapped in a veil of mist, resembled even at a short distance dim, dusky specters, like guilty ghosts condemned for some crime to haunt the scene of their former lives. At last they reached the palace, and Charaka was ushered into the dimly lighted bedroom of Prince Kanishka. Charaka stood motionless and watched the heavy breathing of the patient. He then put his hand gently upon the feverish forehead, and in a low voice demanded water to cool the burning temples of the sick man. Turning to the attendants, he met the questioning eye of a tall and beautiful woman, an almost imperious figure. He knew her well. It was Princess Kamalavati. Kamalavati, the king's daughter and a younger half-sister of the prince. His condition is very bad, whispered Charaka, in reply to the unuttered question that it was written in her face, but not yet hopeless. Where are the nurses who assist you in ministering unto the patient? The two female attendants appeared, and the physician withdrew with them into an adjoining room, where he listened to their reports. The king and his second son have died of the same disease, and the situation is very critical, said Charaka. But we may avoid the mistakes made in the former cases and adjust the diet strictly to the condition of the patient. Charaka and Kanishka were the same age. They had for some time been educated together and were intimate friends. But when the prince joined the royal army, Charaka studied the sciences under the direction of Javaka, the late court physician of Gandhara, and knowing how highly the latter had praised the young man as his best disciple, the prince had unbounded confidence in the medical skill of his boyhood companion. He had suggested calling him when his father, the king, fell sick, but his advice remained unheeded, and now, being himself ill, he was impatient to have the benefit of his friend's assistance. Charaka gave his instructions to the princess and the other attendants, and then sat down quietly by the bedside of the patient. When Kanishka awoke from his restless slumber, he extended his hand and tried to speak, but the physician hushed him, saying, "Keep quiet, and your life will be saved." "I will be quiet," whispered Kanishka, not without great effort, "but save my life for the sake of my country, not for my own sake." After a pause, he continued, "Tell my sister to call Mathura, our brave and faithful Mathura, to my bedside." Mathura, the scion of a noble Gandhara family, had served his country on several occasions and was at present at the capital. He came and waited patiently till Charaka gave him permission to see the patient. In this interview, the prince explained to Mathura the political situation since his father's death. His royal brother, now in the field against the Parthians, was at present the legitimate king. During his absence, said Kanishka, the duty devolves on me as the vicegerent of the crown to keep the mountaineers out of the kingdom, and I call upon you to serve me as chancellor in this critical situation. Raise the troops to expel the marauders, but at the same time exhaust diplomatic methods by appealing to the honor and dignity of the kingdom of Magadha. of which these robber tribes are nominal subjects. Thus, Mathura took charge of the state affairs, and Charaka and Kamalavati united in attending to the treatment of the sick prince. They had weary nights and hours of deep despondency when they despaired of the recovery of their beloved patient, but the crisis came and Kanishka survived it. He regained strength, first slowly, very slowly, then more rapidly, until he felt that he was past all danger. The rainy season had given the people of Gandhara a respite from the suffering caused by the hostilities of their enemies. The king, Kanishka's elder brother, continued to wage war against the Parthians and concentrated his forces for striking a decisive blow. But while the best troops of the country had thus still to be employed against the formidable foe, the mountaineers renewed their raids, and the king of Magadha, too weak to interfere with his stubborn vassals, pleaded their cause, declaring that they had grievances against the kingdom of Gandhara and could therefore not be restrained. The prince accordingly declared war on the kingdom of Magadha. He raised an army, and the young men of the peasantry, who had suffered much from this state of unrest, gladly allowed themselves to be enlisted. And of course, it's important that there's a cause for war. That's not just some thing of, oh, well, the nobles want to, want wealth or something. That the people personally have a grievance. It's for the sake of the people who are fighting. Because let's be real. Buddhism isn't this fluffy thing that we tend to hear about